What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to some more Bible reading. But I'm sure you're wondering what's up with the little cool guy shade emojis on the sides. So, long story short, I'm actually recording this in OBS, which I plan on using eventually for live streaming, but I'm trying to make sure that my video editor can handle, the files from OBS as they're exported or whatever. And anyway, so OBS doesn't really have a good way of filling the whole screen with my camera and it not looking totally weird. Like, it would be way too zoomed in on my face for my liking. But anyway, all right, enough about that. We're here for some Bible reading. So, today we are getting into Genesis 38. So, last time we talked about Joseph and how his brothers didn't like him and sold him off to some people, and he wound up in Egypt. This chapter is not directly related to that. It is still focused on one of Jacob's brothers, or sons, one of Jacob's sons. And I guess just for the sake of keeping the timeline consistent, that's why we're getting into this now. Because the first few words say about this time. So, yeah, timeline, I guess. So anyway, chapter 38, here we go. About this time, Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hira. There he saw a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and he named the boy Then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. And when she gave birth to a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living at Kezib. So, Judah is one of the older sons, I believe. So he left, got married, and had some kids. That's the basic gist of what's happened so far. Let's see what else happens from this, because so far this is fairly normal. Verse 6. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son to marry a young woman named Tamar. But was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to brother Onan, "Go and marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother." So, I didn't really realize this was considered a law for them this early on. A bit later in the Bible, yes, I knew that was a thing. But I didn't realize this was actual law and not just like some sort of general expectation. Because, I mean, it was part of the idea of the whole, keeping some sort of legacy and honor and, be fruitful and multiply. But, I just didn't realize that was considered a law at the time, for lack of a better way to put it. All right. Moving on to verse 9. Gets a bit extra adulty here, but anyway. It's the Bible. All sorts of crazy stuff happens in the Bible, if you haven't realized this by now. Anyway, verse 9. But Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground. This prevented her from having a child who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother. so the Lord took Onan's life too. Well, if it wasn't law before, it was almost definitely considered law after that. 'Cause, yeah, God don't like when, you intend to have a child and then don't. But anyway, later on, there are definitely laws regarding the kind of thing that Onan did there. Basically giving the intention of having a child, but then, backing out on that at the last moment. Anyway, verse 11. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Shelah is old enough to marry you." But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Shelah would also die, like his two brothers. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home. Okay, so, again, if there's that expectation of brothers giving children in lieu of, other brothers of theirs who have died, okay, but I guess Shelah just wasn't quite old enough for that yet. It doesn't really say the ages of his sons when these events happened. But also, the thing in parentheses about him not really wanting to do that because he was afraid of his third son dying. Yeah, kind of understandable. But also, not exactly the most accurate thing if Shelah really was honorable. Because it was the dishonorable or just straight up bad things that his brothers did that caused them to die in the first place. Anyway, so, verse 12. Some years later, Judah's wife died. After the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira the Adullamite went up to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." Okay. So, I'm wondering why they told Tamar about this. Maybe it's because she kind of knew that Shelah should have been old enough to marry at this point. And if she had mentioned as such to any friends or family, I'm sure then, other people might have been on the lookout. And then they're like, "Oh, hey, look, this guy, Judah, your father-in-law, he's here. Maybe you want to talk to him, Well, let's see what actually happened. Verse 14. Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road at the entrance to the village of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute, since she had covered her face. So he stopped and propositioned her. "Let me have sex with you," he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. "How much will you pay to have sex with me?" Tamar asked. Yeah, so... It's not stated outright whether she knew that it was just Judah or whether, maybe she actually wanted to get the attention of his son, Sheila. But I mean, according to the earlier quote, it only mentioned, Judah, her father-in-law. So, I don't know. In any case, she's being a little tricky trying to get his attention. Trying to get somebody's attention so that, maybe they'll eventually actually follow up on what they said they would do. But then Judah makes the mistake of thinking she's a prostitute and, quote-unquote propositions her, as it says there. And of course, as would be expected with a prostitute, you got to consider payments and that kind of stuff, and that's what we're getting into right now. So, verse 17. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send the goat, she asked. What kind of guarantee do you want, he replied. She answered, leave me your identification seal and its cord, and the walking stick you are carrying. So Judah gave them to her. Then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. Afterward she went back home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing as usual. So, there was the arrangement that was made. As to why Judah would have done this in the first place, the only thing that can really come to mind is, well, his wife had died. And, if he was still a guy with those kinds of urges, so to speak, again, such things were more typical back in those days, I guess. It wasn't viewed quite so harshly if you were, even if you were just straight up, not quite loyal to your wife. I mean, consider Jacob himself, and the fact that he had sons with not only two wives but also their servant girls. Anyway, let's move along and see what else happens. Verse 20. Later, Judah asked his friend Hira the Adullamite to take the young goat to the woman and to pick up the things he had given her as his guarantee. But Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, where can I find the shrine prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to Enaim? We've never had a shrine prostitute here, they replied. So, this probably looks odd to Hira. I mean, he was with Judah when they went up to Timnah before. It's not known for sure whether he would have, seen Judah proposition Tamar, but anyway, he would have had some knowledge of where they were, at least. But anyway, yeah. People of the town basically say, no such person exists. We don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, verse 22. So Hira returned to Judah and told him, I couldn't find her anywhere, and the men of the village claim they've never had a shrine prostitute there. Then let her keep the things I gave her, Judah said. I sent the young goat as we agreed, but you couldn't find her. We'd be the laughingstock of the village if we went back again to look for her. I mean, yeah. You're basically told person you're looking for doesn't exist and never has. So if you go back and look for that same kind of thing. Again, it would be almost like saying you saw a unicorn somewhere. I mean, okay, maybe unicorn isn't the best example because some translations of the Bible, namely the King James Version, uses the word unicorn a few times. Little known fact. But anyway, it's like saying you saw some sort of mythical creature that most people don't believe actually even exists, but you seem convinced that it does. Anyway, okay, verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted like a prostitute, and now because of this she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned, Judah demanded. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these? Judah recognized them immediately and said, She is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah. And Judah never slept with Tamar again. Yeah, so whether or not this was her initial plan, once Judah propositioned her, as it was said earlier, I think this was, having his things in her possession was probably kind of her way of forcing the issue and trying to convince him to either just let her be and break off any supposed commitment to his family, or to actually follow up on his word. And since he didn't do that, she's like, all right, you think I'm in the wrong because I got pregnant? Here's the person who got me pregnant. Still think I'm in the wrong? To which Judah's like, no. Now I realize what's happened. Yeah, you're right. But then it just says he never slept with her again. It doesn't even say that he eventually married his youngest son off to her. So I'm not quite sure what happened with Tamar afterwards. Well, we get a little bit into that in the following verses. So, verse 27. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins. While she was in labor, one of the babies reached out his hand. The midwife grabbed it and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing, "This one came out first." But then he pulled back his hand, and out came his brother. "What?" the midwife exclaimed. "How did you break out first?" So he was named Perez. Then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah. So, interesting that Tamar was carrying twins, because that would have somewhat, fulfilled the obligation that Judah was trying to get Onan to fulfill in the first place, except now for both of the deceased sons. And then, let's see here, quick footnote check for name meanings. Perez means breaking out. Again, they're very literal with these names. And Zerah means scarlet or brightness. Scarlet color of the string and or the brightness of the scarlet string. So, yeah, again, very literal names. So, that's the end of the chapter. That's all we've got for now. Next chapter is going to get back to Joseph and his whole situation. So again, I think that was a sidetrack more so for the sake of the timeline and being consistent with that. But anyway, I guess that'll do it for now. So, as always, if you enjoyed the video, share it with others if you want them to see. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell to keep track of my videos here on YouTube. Look down in the description also for information on other social media pages and how to find and follow those. Those are definitely going to be relevant when it comes to live stream stuff, because I'm going to make announcements about those whenever they happen, but probably not. My schedule is not such that I'm currently able to plan super duper far in advance and know that, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to be able to live stream on this day at this time. So you'll probably want to be keeping close track of those if you want to catch my eventual live streams. Anyway, of course, otherwise, leave comments down below with any thoughts that you have. So that's going to do it for now. Hopefully this recording works out. Confession time, this is actually my second attempt at this, because the initial video format recording thing didn't work well with my video editor, but then I realized I can go in and, do something with the file type and make a different version of it, so I'm hoping maybe that'll work out. Otherwise, I'm going to have to consider other options for, the whole live stream / recording session thing. But anyway, I'm sure I'll keep you somewhat updated on that as it happens. Anyway, hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.